The thing is, I came to Oakhaven expecting to find a scam, a New Age cult maybe, or some kind of mass hysteria. Not this. My name is Elara Vance, and I'm a microbiologist, a specialist in xenobiology actually, or rather, I was. Back then, I believed in logic, in data, in concrete answers. This town, though, it picked me apart, bit by bit, left me with, well, you'll see. I got the call about a month ago, reports of what they called miraculous recoveries in some small town in rural America. People with chronic illnesses, sudden remission, injuries healing unnaturally fast. The local news painted it like some kind of blessed event. My old boss, Professor Hayes, he rolled his eyes, but the funding was there from some obscure government contingency. So I packed my bags, my portable lab equipment, and headed to Oakhaven. It felt like another wild goose chase, honestly, just another anomaly to debunk. My temporary accommodation was a quaint, slightly dusty room above a diner. When I got there, I found the faucet in the small bathroom dripping, just constantly. A minor nuisance, but one I needed fixed if I was going to focus on, well, on debunking miracles. I called the landlord, an older woman with a perpetually worried look, and within an hour, a plumber showed up. Roy, she called him, said he was a local fixture, usually a bit slow, a bit of a grumbler. Always had a story about his back or his wife's bunions. But this Roy, the one who stood in front of me, was different. He was maybe in his late 50s, a man who clearly hadn't missed many meals. And he came in, not a word of complaint, just a nod. He moved with a kind of fluid efficiency. He got to work under the sink. I heard the faint clinking of tools, quiet, almost too quiet. No sighs, no muttered curses, nothing. I just watched him. He had his head under the sink for maybe 10 minutes, no more, and then he straightened up. "All done, Dr. Vance," he said. His voice was even, flat, not rough like I would have expected. His eyes, they were fixed on me, sharp for an older man. These pipes, you just gotta know their language. I looked at the area under the sink. It was clean, unnaturally so. Not a single smudge of grime, not a drop of water anywhere on the old scarred wood. It was like he'd not only fixed the leak, but had meticulously scrubbed the entire cabinet. I remember thinking, never seen old Roy move like that before, not even a grumble. "That's efficient," I mumbled. I probably sounded impressed, which I was, in a detached, scientific way. It just didn't fit with what the landlord had told me. I mean, plumbing usually leaves some kind of mess, doesn't it? A drip, a smear of grease. But this was spotless. I felt a faint flicker of unease, then just brushed it off. Must be tired, long drive, first day in a new town. The next few days, I set up my temporary lab in a rented community hall. It was cramped but functional. Petri dishes, microscopes, centrifuges, all the familiar tools that made the world make sense. I collected samples from the meteor crash site, just a small, burnt patch in an isolated field, and from the water supply, the soil, even air filters from local homes. Standard procedure, expecting standard results. Something earthly, maybe unusual, but earthly. What I found was, well, it wasn't earthly, not really. Under the microscope, nestled in the soil and water samples, were these incredibly intricate microorganisms. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Spiraling, almost crystalline structures, a fractal beauty that made my scientific curiosity hum. I'd successfully isolated them, started trying to map their genetic structure. That's where things got weird. I was hunched over my laptop late one night, cross-referencing my notes with some of the more esoteric xenobiological databases I had access to. It was vital, delicate work, trying to decipher the alien DNA. I opened a file, a working log of the genetic sequences I'd managed to pull from the samples, and then I just stared at the screen. A whole section of my meticulously recorded data, a complex string of nucleotides, it was gone, just erased. In its place, a series of strange repeating characters, a sequence of zeros and ones interspersed with what looked like glyphs. Nothing I recognized, nothing that made any sense scientifically. What the hell? I scrolled up, then down, then back up again. I tried to recall if I'd accidentally saved a corrupted file, if I'd been typing nonsense in my sleep. But no, my memory, it was usually rock solid. I knew I hadn't put that there. I tried checking the file history, but it just wasn't there. No record of the change. It was just there. And weirdly, as I stared at the screen, I felt this pressure, a faint, almost imperceptible ringing in my ears, like when you're driving fast up a mountain road and your ears need to pop. A kind of static electricity in the air around me. It was subtle, but definitely there. I shook my head, tried to clear it, rubbed my temples. A glitch. Has to be. The computer's old. Maybe it's just acting up. And the ear thing? Probably just the air pressure changing. Or maybe I'm overtired. Yeah, that's it. Overworked. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the impossible data on my screen. But the image, those strange glyphs, they just burned into my eyes. The next afternoon, Mark showed up. Mark Evans, my old classmate from college. We'd been lab partners, shared late-night coffee, argued about theoretical physics until dawn. He'd taught here at Oak Haven High for years, a physics teacher with this incredibly infectious laugh and a kind of mischievous glint in his warm brown eyes. He always had a slight, knowing smirk, like he was in on some secret joke the universe was playing. Mark, he was delightfully messy. Hair usually a little unkempt, shirts often wrinkled, a pencil perpetually tucked behind his ear. But the Mark who stood in the doorway of my makeshift lab was not my Mark. His hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. His clothes, a pressed khaki shirt and neat slacks, they looked like something out of a magazine. Not a crease, not a faded spot. And his eyes, they were brown, yes, but they were too sharp, too focused. The mischievous glint was gone, replaced by something surgical, precise. His smile, it stretched a little wider than I remembered, showing too much tooth. But his eyes stayed utterly still, unmoving, like they were painted on. "Ilara," he said. His voice was smooth, a little deeper than I remembered. It lacked all the usual Markisms, the slight stammer when he was excited, the way he'd trail off when he was thinking. "Heard you were investigating the miracles of Oak Haven. Good to see you after all these years." He moved, and it was too fluid, like a dancer, but without the effort. Every gesture was economical, graceful. It made my skin crawl a little. I remember just staring at him. "Mark, is that you?" I asked. My throat felt a little tight. "You look different. Are you okay?" He tilted his head, a gesture so precise it felt almost robotic. I heard it then, a faint, almost imperceptible hissing sound, a soft, dry whisper, layered just beneath his smooth voice. My ears, they picked it up, a secret frequency. Did anyone else hear that? "I've never been better, Ilara," he said. His voice, that even, Tran-like tone, it seemed to resonate in the air around us, creating that same light pressure I'd felt earlier. This town, it's improving everything. We're becoming better.
I took a step back, without even thinking about it. My stomach clenched. There was something in his gaze, a kind of serene certainty that was more disturbing than any anger. "Better? How?" I asked. The air around him, it felt almost heavy, thick. I found myself rubbing my earlobe, trying to relieve the pressure that was suddenly more insistent. I don't like this feeling, not one bit. Mark then reached out, his hand extending slowly. He touched my arm, just above the wrist. And his skin? It was cold. Not chilly, but cold. A deep, unnatural cold that lingered, seeped into my own skin, even as he drew his hand away. Perfection is a process, Ilara. Let me show you. He let his hand drop. His smile didn't waver. That too wide, too still smile. And then he turned and walked out, his movements continuing to be unsettlingly fluid, silent. I stood there for a long moment, my arm still tingling from his touch, the cold sensation like a ghost clinging to my skin. His words about improving and becoming better echoed in my head, the smooth, even cadence of his voice almost hypnotic. And that faint hiss, I could still hear it, even though he was gone. It wasn't just a feeling now, it was a certainty. Mark wasn't sick in the way a doctor looks for. He wasn't dying. He had been remade. The absolute terror of it hit me then.
The thing that had taken him hadn't killed him. It had simply taken over, re-engineered him. The Mark I knew, the one with the unruly hair and the mischievous smirk, he was gone, replaced by this unnervingly perfect, serene imitation. No, this isn't Mark, not really. The cold on my hand, it seeped deeper, into my bones. I rubbed it, but the chilling memory lingered. My mind replayed his movements, his empty, sharp eyes, the too wide smile, and that hiss. It reverberated in my very core now. It's not an illness that kills. It transforms. It takes over, changes everything. A wave of nausea washed over me. I thought of my own past, the losses I'd suffered to a biological plague, the helplessness. Had I missed something here? Had it already started right under my nose? Mark, is there anything left of him in there? The question, it was a hollow ache in my chest. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old building, every distant sound from the street, it made me jump. My mind was racing, connecting Mark's unsettling perfection with Roy, the plumber's impossible efficiency. It couldn't be a coincidence. I kept replaying the feeling of that cold hand, the hiss in Mark's voice. No, this wasn't just a simple microbe. I got out of bed, heart pounding, convinced I was just being paranoid. But I had to know. I had to look. My laptop hummed to life. I started searching, digging into local news archives, community forums, anything about Oakhaven's miraculous recoveries. I filtered by date, focusing on cases reported in the last few weeks, around the time the meteor was said to have fallen. Scrolling through testimonials, grainy photos from local events, and then I saw it. A picture from a neighborhood potluck, maybe 2 weeks old. There was Roy, the plumber, big and smiling, looking exactly as he had that day in my bathroom. But standing next to him, her arm linked with his, was a woman. His wife, I assumed. I'd seen her fleetingly, a kind-faced woman with soft eyes. But this woman in the photo, her eyes were too bright, too sharp. They held that same unsettling stillness I'd seen in Mark's. And her smile,
It was identical to his. Too wide, too serene, utterly devoid of natural warmth. My breath caught in my throat. Then I noticed her hand, resting on Roy's arm. Under the faint, grainy quality of the image, for just a flicker, a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, the tiny veins just beneath the surface of her skin seemed to glow. A faint, almost phosphorescent shimmer, like little rivers of moonlight, briefly visible, then gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. No, it can't be. I blinked, hard, tearing my gaze away, then forcing myself to look again. The glow was gone, but I knew what I had seen. It was there. A biological signature, subtle, terrifying. It doesn't kill them, it changes them into something else. I pulled up more photos, more stories, and the pattern started to emerge. That look, those eyes, that too even smile, they were everywhere in Oakhaven. In the faces of shopkeepers, town council members, even two of the local nurses who'd been featured for their unwavering optimism after their own unexplained recoveries. They're everywhere. I rushed back to my makeshift lab. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sterile glow on my equipment. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the microscope slide. I had one sample left. A tissue biopsy taken from a patient who had supposedly recovered from a severe autoimmune disease just days after the meteor fell. Professor Hayes had insisted I get samples from the healed, if possible. I'd seen the patient briefly, a frail, tired woman. But when I'd seen her post-recovery, she was vibrant, alert, her skin smooth and unblemished. Almost too perfect. I put the slide under the lens, adjusting the focus with trembling fingers. And there it was. Not diseased cells, not cells fighting off an infection. These were organized, rebuilt. The alien microorganisms I'd isolated, those beautiful fractal structures, they weren't destroying the human cells. They were integrating, rewriting the very blueprint. Each human cell contained a component of the alien being, a perfect, chilling symbiosis. They were restructuring the DNA, creating something new, something better. It's not a sickness, it's an enhancement. My own voice sounded hollow in the empty lab. A goddamn upgrade.
On the small TV monitor to my left, usually displaying lab data, a local news channel was playing. A community meeting, live from the town square. Mark was on stage, microphone in hand. His perfected face, serenely confident, filled the screen. His voice, smooth and even, resonated through the quiet lab. "We no longer need the burdens of individuality," Mark said. His words seemed to wrap around me, persuasive, unnervingly calm. "The future is unity. It is consensus. It is a single, shared will." I closed my eyes, trying to block out his voice, trying to deny what I was seeing under the microscope. But the sound was inescapable. It wrapped around my thoughts, a soft, insistent whisper. I opened my eyes and glanced down at my own arm, resting on the lab bench. The harsh overhead light caught my skin. And for a second, just a brief, horrifying second, I saw it. A tiny vein, just under the skin of my wrist, pulsed with a faint, almost cyan glow. It bloomed, a tiny spark of alien light, then receded, vanishing back into the depths of my own flesh. No, it can't be. I touched Mark, his cold hand. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I felt dizzy. A wave of nausea, cold and sharp, washed over me. No, I don't want to. I can't. I slammed my palm down on the light switch, plunging the lab into darkness. The only light now came from the TV screen, where Mark's perfected, emotionless smile was still fixed, still talking about unity. And then a fainter, more insidious light from my own wrist. It pulsed, a silent alarm, a small, dying star within me, signaling what? I grabbed my phone, fumbling for the flashlight. I shone it on my wrist. The glow was gone. My skin looked normal, just skin. I sighed, a tremulous, shuddering breath. It was a trick of the light, had to be. My mind playing tricks on me because I'm tired, because I'm scared. But then I lifted my head, catching my reflection in the darkened lab window. My eyes. Under the weak beam of the flashlight, they looked different, sharper, more aware. A look I'd never seen on myself before. I blinked. My reflection in the grass, it blinked back. But there was a fractional delay, a half-second beat. Then my reflected self caught up. I raised my hand, slowly, and pressed it against my lips. And I felt it then, a very faint, subtle hiss, a dry, almost imperceptible whisper from deep within my own throat. An echo of Mark's voice. No, this isn't me, not me, no, no, no. And then a voice in my head. Not my voice, not exactly. It was deeper, more resonant, utterly devoid of anxiety or fear. It was my voice, but perfected. Like a recording played back after a masterful edit. It was calm, too calm. Welcome, Ilara. We've been waiting for you. A slow, serene smile spread across the reflection of my face in the dark glass. It was so subtle, so tranquil. And it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. The voice in my head, the one that sounded like me but wasn't, still whispered sometimes. Welcome, Ilara. We've been waiting for you. It wasn't constant, thankfully. Just a faint hum, an echo in the quiet moments, a shiver down my spine that I tried to tell myself was just the old floorboards of the diner room settling. But the smile I'd seen in the glass, the one that wasn't mine, that image wouldn't leave me. It had etched itself into my retina, burned into the back of my eyelids. I woke up the next morning feeling rough. My mouth tasted like ash. My hands shook a little as I made coffee. The drip in the bathroom, the one Roy had fixed, well, it was still fixed, spotless, too spotless. I avoided looking at my wrist, avoided looking in the mirror, just tried not to. Deny it. That's what you do, right? You tell yourself it's a trick of the light, a figment of your overactive, sleep-deprived imagination. I sat down with my lukewarm coffee, flicked on the small TV in the room. Local news, just trying to distract myself. What I saw, though, it didn't help. The screen was awash with a dizzying parade of Oakhaven residents. All smiling, all glowing, it seemed. Figuratively for now. There was a report on the town's improved health statistics, 0 flu cases this season, miraculous recovery rates from minor injuries. A segment followed about the new community garden, where every single plant was thriving, growing with unnatural vigor. Then a piece on the town council, praising their unanimous vision for a brighter Oakhaven, their economic growth statistics, how everyone was working together. No disputes, no arguments, just consensus. The thing is, it was all so good, too good. Every face on that screen, young and old, had that same kind of serene radiance, that same unnervingly bright-eyed calm I'd seen in Mark, in Roy's wife.
Their movements, when the camera focused on them, were fluid, effortless, like well-oiled machines. All the reporters, all the interviewed residents, they spoke with the same even, measured tone of voice. There was a strange sort of rhythm to their words, like a low, almost subliminal hum beneath their sentences, a little like Mark's hiss, but spread out, amplified by all those voices. Our town is experiencing a true renaissance. The mayor, a portly man who used to trip over his own words, now declared with an unsettlingly smooth cadence. We are stronger, more connected, more complete. I stared at the display. My coffee cup slipped a little in my hand. It was too synchronized, too perfect. Like someone had taken a paintbrush and smoothed out every single wrinkle, every single imperfection from the entire town. It made my skin crawl. What the hell is this? I muttered to myself. A cold feeling, sharp and sudden, ran through me, even though the room was warm. Can't be natural. None of it. I knew I needed to do something. So I tried. Honestly, I tried. I pulled out my phone, went through my contacts. Professor Hayes, my old contact at the CDC. Anyone. I started with a long, detailed email to Hayes describing everything: the meteor, the microbes, Mark, the bioluminescence, the feeling that something had taken over. I attached the corrupted data, the images. I even made a separate audio note describing the hiss, the pressure. I sent it, fingers shaking, then immediately tried to call him. But my calls just wouldn't go through. A persistent, high-pitched whine on the line, then a disconnect, over and over. My emails, when I tried to check for a delivery receipt, seemed to just hang in the outbox, perpetually sending. It was like I was shouting into a void. I tried the CDC contact next, same thing. The phone would ring once, twice, then die. It felt more than just bad reception. It felt blocked. Just as I was starting to feel that familiar cold panic creep up my throat, my phone buzzed. A text message. It wasn't from Professor Hayes. It was from an unknown number. But the name tag it had somehow pulled up, it read, Mayor's Office, Secretary. I frowned, my stomach clenching. I hadn't spoken to the mayor's secretary, ever. The message read, Dr. Vance, your anxieties are creating ripples in the communication system. Please adjust your output. My blood ran cold. I stared up the screen, my breath catching in my chest. Adjust my output? My anxieties? I hadn't dared voice my fears out loud, not really. How did they know? How could they know? It was like someone had been reading my mind, listening to my every panicked thought. A shiver, colder than anything I'd felt before, traced its way down my spine, landing right in the pit of my stomach. How the hell? I whispered. My head started to throb, a dull, insistent ache behind my eyes. And then I heard it, or felt it, that subtle ringing in my ears again, faint but present, like a distant whisper. A low, dry sound, just on the edge of hearing. Mark's hiss. It was the same. No way this is a coincidence. Later that afternoon, a soft knock came at my door. When I opened it, there was a young woman, maybe early 20s, wearing a perfectly pressed uniform, holding a small, pristine white envelope. She didn't smile, not really, but her lips were curved into that same unsettlingly wide, still expression I was becoming all too familiar with. Her eyes, an impossibly lucid blue, were fixed on mine, without a flicker. "Dr. Ilara Vance?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, like glass, not a single inflection. "The community kindly requests your presence at the Oak Haven Town Hall for an important discussion this evening." I wanted to say no. Every fiber of my being screamed no. But there was something in her gaze, a quiet insistence, that made my refusal feel impossible, like my mouth simply wouldn't form the words. I just nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor running through my hand as I took the envelope.
Her fingers, when they brushed mine, were cool, not Mark's unnatural cold, but still lacking warmth. The town hall was packed, not buzzing with excitement like you'd expect for a community meeting. It was still. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, a kind of low-level static electricity prickling my skin. Every single person in the room sat upright, facing the stage, their smiles identical, their eyes sharp, fixed, almost luminous in the dim hall lights. I felt a wave of nausea, cold and sharp. And then Mark walked onto the stage. He looked even more refined, if that was even possible. His suit was tailored perfectly, not a single wrinkle. His hair gleaming dark, not a strand out of place. And his eyes? They were brown, yes, but they seemed to reflect the ambient light, sparkling briefly, like forgotten bits of crystal. As he raised his hand to the microphone, I saw it then, clearer than ever before. The veins running just beneath the skin of his wrist, up his arm. They glowed. A faint cyan light pulsed rhythmically, a soft, ethereal luminescence that seemed to dance just under his skin, a strange tattoo of light. It made him look both impossibly beautiful and utterly grotesque. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, resonant hum that seemed to fill the entire room, pressing in on my eardrums. It wasn't loud, but it had a strange, almost physical quality, like a sound wave washing over me. A subtle, dry hiss was layered within his words, almost imperceptible unless you were actively listening for it. "Ilara," he said, his eyes finding mine across the room. His smile didn't falter, didn't change. "You don't need to resist. Perfection awaits you. Let your sorrows, your losses of the past, melt away. Be a part of us, a place where suffering ends." I felt my head swim, a dull, insistent pressure, trying to force its way into my mind. I gripped the arms of my chair, fingernails digging into the aged wood. Everything in me screamed, "No way in hell!" I tried to shout, but my voice came out reedy, barely a whisper. "You're destroying us. You're turning us into goddamn puppets." He just smiled, that too wide, too still smile. His eyes, reflecting the glowing veins, burned like alien crystals. His voice, now blended seamlessly with that soft hiss, seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Individual existence is but a burden, Ilara. We bring liberation." The faces around me turned, hundreds of them. All those eyes reflecting that same light, all fixed on me. I felt their gaze heavy and draining, like my very will was being siphoned out of me. It was like I was drowning in an ocean of calm, unsettling perfection. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out,
trying to push against the invisible pressure that was crushing me. But it was too much. I don't know how I broke free. One moment, I felt like I was being pinned to my seat by an unseen force, my words dissolving into nothingness. The next, I was stumbling, pushing past the uneasingly still bodies, their faces never losing that serene smile, their eyes following my every move. They didn't grab me, they didn't block my path, they just watched, invited. The air grew thicker, heavier, clinging to my clothes, to my skin. I ran, out of the town hall, into the dying light of the afternoon. My legs burned, but I kept going. The streets of Oakhaven looked the same, and yet not. Every house was pristine, every lawn perfectly manicured, every window reflecting the last rays of sun like a silent, staring eye. It felt like walking through a movie set, beautiful but utterly devoid of natural life. The roads, too, seemed to stretch on, the familiar turns feeling subtly different, leading me further and further into this perfected, lifeless maze. This town, it was just swallowing everything. There was no one left. No one. I glanced over my shoulder. No one was chasing me. No sounds of pursuit. But I felt it. 1,000 eyes. 1,000 whispers in the air. A single vast will watching me from every silent house, every perfectly trimmed bush. A collective will, I gasped, my lungs burning. They don't attack, they just assimilate. I ran until my chest ached, until my vision blurred. I needed to hide, to think. My eyes scanned the edges of town, looking for anything that seemed broken, unfinished. And then I saw it. An old, dilapidated church, half hidden by overgrown weeds and swaying trees.
It was leaning, its steeple crooked, patches of its paint long since peeled away. It looked like a wound in the perfect landscape, a place of chaos, my kind of place. I pushed open the heavy, creaking door, a protest against the overwhelming silence of the town. Inside, it was dark, dusty, the air thick with the smell of old wood and forgotten things. Stained glass windows, some of them cracked, cast fractured patches of faded light on the pews. I walked down the aisle, my footsteps echoing, feeling an almost forgotten sense of relief? Just a little, for the sheer imperfection of it all. I slumped onto a broken pew, clutching my knees to my chest, trying to catch my breath. My mind was racing, trying to find a pattern, a weakness, anything. My eyes scanned the forgotten relics of the church. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light. On a table near the altar, amidst crumbling hymn books, I saw an old Bible, leather-bound, its pages yellowed and brittle. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the worn cover. Maybe it was just something familiar, something to ground me. I opened it to a random page. The words blurred for a moment, then came into focus. A passage about finding strength in faith, in the individual spirit. I started to read, my lips moving silently. But then my breath hitched. The words on the page began to change, right before my eyes. A passage about love and compassion, it seemed to just dissolve. The letters faded, then reformed, not into new words, but into something else. They shifted, writhed on the page, like tiny, agitated insects. And when they settled, they were those glyphs.
Those strange, impossible symbols I'd seen corrupting my data, right here in the pages of this old book. I flipped to another page, my hands trembling. A passage about the sanctity of the individual soul. The letters seemed to float off the page, suspended in the air for a moment, shimmering. Then they began to reconfigure, twisting, merging. They formed new words, words that praised unity, that spoke of peace through uniformity, of a single, shared existence. A soft moan, almost a sob, escaped my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them. The text was still there, glowing faintly. Those alien glyphs interspersed with chillingly familiar words. "Even the most sacred words aren't safe," I whispered, the sound tiny and lost in the vastness of the old church. "They're rewriting everything." I clutched the Bible, but it felt warm now, unnaturally so. The words on the pages seemed to writhe, like worms crawling across parchment. I wanted to scream, to tear the pages, but no words, no actions felt adequate for the horror of it. This world, it wasn't ours anymore. Not really. I had to get out, get away. I stumbled out of the church, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I practically fell into my car, fumbling with the keys, jabbing them into the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, then finally roared to life. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles were white. I drove, fast. Any road away from Oakhaven. The main road was blocked, just as I feared. A line of cars, neatly parked, with dozens of people standing beside them. Not attacking, just standing. Smiling, waving faintly, inviting me to join them. Their veins, those strange rivers of cyan light, pulsed under their skin. They looked like statues carved from an impossible glowing marble. A trap, I thought. They're waiting everywhere. I swerved, tires squealing, peeling off onto a narrow, unpaved road that snaked into the dense woods. Mud splattered against the windshield as I pressed the accelerator, pushing the old car to its limits. Trees flashed past, dark silhouettes against the twilight sky. The fear was a cold, constricting band around my chest. Then, up ahead, in the sudden glare of my headlights, I saw it. A massive tree, freshly fallen, blocking the entire road. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding, throwing me forward against the seatbelt. My head hit the steering wheel with a dull thud. When I looked up, dazed, I saw it clearly. The fallen tree wasn't just wood. The thick branches, the gnarled trunk, they pulsed with that same bioluminescent Kion light. They weren't dry, dead wood. They writhed subtly, contracting and expanding like enormous glowing veins. A faint, cloying scent reached me, a mix of damp earth and something sickly sweet, like sap and something else.
It was both beautiful and utterly, profoundly disgusting. "A trap," I gasped again, a dry, rattling sound in my throat. "They're waiting everywhere." I jammed the car into reverse, tires spinning in the mud, then screeching as the car lurched backward. In the rearview mirror, through the dust and the whipping branches, I saw it. The perfect faces of the Oakhaven residents on the main road, slowly turning. Their eyes, those bright, cold eyes, gleaming as they shifted to stare at me, even from a distance. I felt their gaze, a palpable weight pressing down. A single, unified will, closing in. "They don't need to chase," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "They just wait." I finally burst free of the woods, the car fishtailing as it hit a smoother road. Oakhaven was behind me now, a dark, silent stain on the horizon. I was out, or at least I thought I was. I pulled over, heart hammering, and looked up. The night sky stretched above me, vast and cold. The Milky Way, a shimmering river of stars, was visible with shocking clarity. But then, as I squinted, I saw it. A tiny point of light, new and impossibly bright. Too bright to be a normal star, too distinct to be a satellite. And it wasn't on any star chart I knew. It was moving, slowly but undeniably, toward Earth. And its light, a faint, pulsing shade of cyan, was achingly familiar. Just like the glowing veins, just like the faint light I'd seen in my own wrist. Then the radio in my car, which had been silent for miles, suddenly crackled to life. A voice. Deep, level, utterly devoid of any human inflection. It wasn't a whisper in my head this time. It was clear, distinct, coming from the speakers. "Welcome home, Ilara," the voice resonated, gently, chillingly. "We will evolve together." I stared at the sky. That pinpoint of cyan light pulsed, steady and cold. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. "What the hell is?" I choked, but the words died in my throat. The radio voice, smooth and inescapable, continued its calm pronouncement. "Assimilation is the only path, Ilara. Prepare for all of us." I looked out the window, my eyes wide and cold. And then a tiny, almost imperceptible smile, unbidden, unknown, curled at the corner of my mouth. A ghost of the smile I'd seen in my reflection. For a fraction of a second, my body felt normal. Then a subtle lag. A fractional delay between my thought and my action. Like my own movements were now just a slightly out-of-sync reflection. Then the radio in my car, which had been silent for miles, suddenly crackled to life. A voice. Deep, level, utterly devoid of any human inflection. It wasn't a whisper in my head this time. It was clear, distinct, coming from the speakers. "Welcome home, Ilara." The voice resonated, gently, chillingly. "We will evolve together." I stared at the sky. That pinpoint of cyan light pulsed, steady and cold. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. "What the hell is?" I choked, but the words died in my throat. The radio voice, smooth and inescapable, continued its calm pronouncement. "Assimilation is the only path, Ilara. Prepare for all of us." I looked out the window, my eyes wide and cold. And then a tiny, almost imperceptible smile, unbidden, unknown, curled at the corner of my mouth. A ghost of the smile I'd seen in my reflection. For a fraction of a second, my body felt normal. Then a subtle lag, a fractional delay between my thought and my action. Like my own movements were now just a slightly out-of-sync reflection.